Today we are starting our season 3, I think, of INTEA breakfasts. And as we have already announced in our intro video to this season, then we are starting this first episode with talking about learning and development maturity framework, brought to us by Sergey.
Yes, so this is something not entirely new to us, definitely, but something fresh and a new take that we wanted to discuss. In general, I think this season will be about rather strategic things that your organization can do, but also very practical. I think we'll try to keep this very, very actionable so that you don't just kind of get inspired, but also have concrete things that you can actually work on when you leave a breakfast. The first thing that we actually wanted to ask, and this is interactive, so don't hesitate by show of hands or by typing in chat. So the question is, have you missed us? The chat is there, you can find it.
Yeah,
we trust that someone will say yes.
Yes, I see hands being raised, so yes.
Right, excellent. We definitely missed you too. If you are new to this kind of breakfasts, don't forget to Google YouTube INTEA Learning. It will bring you to our YouTube channel where all of these breakfasts are recorded and shared for your use. Feel free to share them with colleagues, steal slides if you want, and so on. We're very happy if this helps you. This breakfast will also be recorded and posted in there maybe a couple of days later. So yeah, let's begin, shall we? So DevLearn, this is the biggest e-learning event in the United States, which is basically the biggest e-learning event in the world. And although it's mostly dedicated to actually developing learning, to the technical aspects of actually building courses, building content, new ways of delivery, and so on, there's a very strong track, or even a few tracks of strategic items. And it was kind of funny. So I was there a couple of weeks ago. I was speaking at one of those tracks, and then I was listening to another track by Leo. Leo is this huge e-learning organization from UK originally, but they operate globally. And we know them for many, many years. They're amazing in terms of how they analyze things and the content that they build and so on. And I was at their stage and I saw this maturity framework, and I took this picture and I sent this picture like right then and there to Raivis, just to make sure that we don't forget to actually include this into breakfast. And why that was, it's not because it was the first time of me seeing the maturity framework. We've seen a lot of them. We used some of those in the past. This Berson's model is rather great, and there's a ton of those. But that one kind of struck a chord because it was very well organized, and I really felt that finally I can actually make use of it and share it with a wider audience, and kind of make sense of, and help you rather make sense of where you are in the learning and development journey of your company or organization. So we'll just get right onto it and start. I have rebuilt this as a slide. You can, if you like, we can share this slide with you later. Just let us know in the chat or just email us. We'll go one by one, and we actually had a little bit of a dilemma here, right?
Yeah.
So what do we do? Do we walk through every aspect of this, through people and through processes and so on, or we go column by column? And I think it just makes sense to go level by level. So we'll start with level 1, right?
Right, yeah. Why I particularly like this model, because it separates people, processes, technology, content, and culture. Very often these models get messy about this, so this is really much more concrete. And yeah, level 1, emerging, right? In my experience working with different kind of companies, this is a level that you see mostly with startups, not necessarily tech startups. It can be, just something new. Like 10 years ago, we had a client, or started to work with a client called Standards retail store network here in the Baltics that actually aspired to grow globally, and they started to do that. And they were really in this emerging situation where you grow from 10 people to 100 people. You don't have really an HR manager at all. You have an office manager,
more or less,
yeah, who does all of this. Yeah, right. So,
and then the question of training comes up, and previously, if you had to communicate anything internally, you would just gather everyone around and talk. Whereas now you have this basically global organization where you have to do that. Another example is the company sitting right next to us here. It's a large financial startup which grew from 10 people locally to having representation in like 50 different countries, where all people through very different cultures have to kind of be on the same page and so on. And if you look at those aspects, then on this first emerging learning and development function, now the people who actually do that, and that will be important later, are the enthusiasts, right? You don't have a specific person who's responsible for learning. You have some people who decided, yeah, I can probably do that, or I kind of no one else is doing that, so I will be the hero who will do that. And there's no really a process that you are just responding to fires. Like, we recently found out that people don't really understand our software, so yeah, let's record something about that. Or we're launching this new product and we need a presentation about that, so someone has to do that, and so on. The technology is also can be absolutely anything. Probably today it's mostly Zoom and presentations and emails and so on. And the content sporadic. I like, the Leo, although this is built by Brits, and when I was rebuilding it, I rebuilt it from American English into British English, then the vocabulary they use is pretty cool. So sporadic content, essentially, you just create something when you need it, typically after the fact, when you realize that something has been missing, right? And the whole culture of the organization is about training. It's about, okay, this is the function that you need to be able to do, so we'll train you to do that. And people are essentially sitting there just waiting for them to be trained. And if they aren't trained, they can't do their jobs. Well, so be it. I would say this is a very top-down approach, where you're training your people and they're sitting there, like little birds, mouths open, waiting for this training to kind of dip in.
Yeah, and I think that the key here at this stage is that the training appears because out of necessity, as you said.
Right.
I mean, or maybe out of enthusiasm, in the sense that there is somebody really, really passionate about the topic, and they think, yeah, everybody has to know about this. It's so important. But there's no structure. There's no process that you can rely on.
At the same time, if you think that you know someone, or you are at this level, and what we won't do, by the way, we will not ask you like, what level do you think you're on, or anything like that, because it's a tough question for a lot of people. First of all, it requires a little bit of reflection, and second of all, well, given that there are 5 levels, you probably won't have to admit that you're on level 1. Although those 5 levels, we'll get to there.
We'll get to there. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's not a competition of levels.
No, not at all. So yeah, exactly. What I was trying to say is that even if you're on level 1 emerging, it's mostly about the maturity of your person. It does not mean that the content is bad. The content can actually be excellent at this level, because again, it's built by people who love what they're doing and they're trying to fix a real problem. And the problem already exists. And 2, there can still be a lot of content. So again, getting back to standards, 10 years ago, they had a lot of content. They had a lot of great trainers who had great presentations. When we started working with them, it was mostly about kind of aligning everything into certain processes rather than building content from scratch. Actually, the content was really great because it was easy to sit down with people who were really passionate about training, and they will tell you, this is what we're training on, this is how it works, now we just need to scale it up, basically.
Yeah, and I think scaling it up is where this level kind of is. This is where you outgrow of the level 1.
Yes,
because you at some point you need to scale it up, and on this level you don't have anything to kind of build to scale up on.
Right. So let's jump to the next level. Leo called this managing, and this is essentially where you're trying to make sense of this emerging training in different parts of your organization. You're trying to understand that. Now, at this moment, learning is not done by like professional learning specialists or anything. It's mostly a function of the HR management, who start overseeing that, start to trying to understand like if there are certain training needs and try to match those needs again on a need-to basis in a way.
One thing that happens at this level, at least in my experience, that it's the first time when you see a matrix appearing of skills versus job roles.
Right.
So this is what the HR is trying to solve here. Okay, so what kind of needs we have in terms of training, to which positions need that, and then we tick the boxes and we figure out what are the kind of hot areas, so to say. But again, this is still not a very, how to say that?
Not a very consistent
process. Not a very consistent process. And since learning and development is not exactly part of HR, as in every HR person knows what learning and development is.
Right.
Right. So it's very managerial approach. It's very much, you know, we need health and safety training. Here's the person who knows it, he'll do it. So we don't go into instructional design and what kind of learnings are better for what kind of audience, you know. Right. No, it's just we have to tick the boxes. Yeah, we're building some kind of a basement.
Also, speaking of technology, this is the first time that you actually look at buying a learning management system.
Yeah.
And this is where you actually get overwhelmed by what learning and management systems offer you. And you're like, oh my God, this is extremely expensive, extremely complex. And do we even need that? And there are now solutions which kind of cater to that. But again, a few years ago, when we started working with a huge retail chain, Rimi, we started by actually building an LMS for them, which was super simplistic. It allowed them to deliver specific pieces of training in a very simple interface that's very accessible to everyone in the company. And all it had is
basically 5 courses, I think.
Yeah,
and 5 topics.
Functionally, it had like a tracking function which would say that yes, this guy has completed this course and has not completed that course, and so on. But then what started is they said, oh, can we actually build that matrix that Davis was talking about? Can we actually define job roles for people, and can we match courses to those job roles? So when you switch into a job role, you get the access to everything that you need. Can we build in a scheduler, I think, so that you have deadlines for completion? Can we build in management dashboards so that because it's actually part again very consistent with level 2, because the responsibility of people being trained was with the store managers. Basically, they were there on the ground and they were responsible for their people being trained. So they have to have a dashboard for their store to see, and they started doing that. And at one point we said, okay, we understand that. Let's start looking for a proper big solution from a reputable vendor before we start building a crappy LMS that kind of satisfies.
Yeah, because at this point, what happens? This technology, as you have just said, Sergey, is to take on an LMS where you don't have too many learning specialists, you don't have content, you don't have understanding of how to do that. It's such a huge endeavor. So by building this proto LMS for them, we kind of put some stepping stones in that on that way.
But right? it's still a huge problem. Actually, a lot of companies are there, and most learning management systems, by the nature of the market of the LMS, which won't go into detail right now, but by nature of the market, more complex, more expensive learning management system will bring you more money as the LMS vendor. So there are not very many simple, basic learning management systems, and that's kind of a gap in the market where everyone is trying to fill in. And a year or two later, they are this complex, huge LMS again, because it's just a way to make more money. So it's always a problem, and we know that, and we ourselves struggle with that a lot. But there are ways around it anyhow. And the final point is the culture. So at this level, you kind of It's not about like leaving their expect them to balance, spend certain time and energy that you are offering them, right? And yeah, speaking of content, this is where you start building catalog, where this metrics comes in, and you start, okay, well, we have compliance, we have safety, we have product training, we have process training, we have onboarding, and so on and so on. So you start building this thing and expect people to kind of navigate through that and try to get in there. But again, you will have whole areas of companies who do not have access to training at all. So all your white collar office employees, they all have this LMS and everything, but then 80% of your company who are there on the floor don't have any training at all, or vice versa, which also happens, like where you start by fixing, you know, the burning fires, like, hey, there's safety in the warehouses, let's train all of those guys, and, you know, we'll train managers through non-e-learning means later.
I mean, the managers have to know.
Yeah, let's just hire people who already know that or something. Right. So, big question, quick question. Does it make sense to you? Do you find this useful? Nod your heads, wave your hands, type pluses in chat. We need one plus to continue. We have one yes. Okay, that'll work for us. Yeah. Excellent. Now, with level 3, and this is where this spoiler alert, this is the last level, I would say, that we have seen in real life. That is what's happening in most of our clients where we work with this. So at this level, you actually start bringing in either external specialists to build training, or you start hiring your own learning specialists who actually think about not how to transfer content, but you start measuring things, you start understanding the uptake, you start to look into how that content that we're churning out is actually performing. Does it actually change people's lives and behaviors? Can we fix that? Can we improve that? And so on. You start defining processes. This is like one example is, for example, in Swedbank, they have a checklist of quality of e-learning courses that is known upfront to any e-learning vendor, externally and internally. And it has some very, very good things like, does it make sense? Is everything tidy? Are all illustrations annotated and copyright protected? Do we have references for all the info and so on? Does it include assessment? And, you know, lots of things. And every course has to pass this basic check. So you cannot just, you know, pass a PowerPoint for a course, right? Or you cannot just forget to include a knowledge assessment into a course, because it has to be there by standard. You know, we can discuss whether every course needs a knowledge check and so on, but there's a standard, you have to pass it. If you're not passing it, you know, there has to be at least a discussion about why is that. So there's a defined quality level at least.
And I think that here at this level, what's also very important is that there's also change of culture. Because on the level 2, learning is a pressing necessity. It's very much a business driven. We need to learn because otherwise we cannot do things, right?
Or rather, they have to learn.
Or they have to, right. They have to learn because otherwise we'll be failing as a business. Here, we are starting to look at how learning is not solving pressing problems, but it's a bit more proactive, a bit more looking into the future. Like for example, you start to introduce courses on sustainability, courses about, you know, technology and things like, you know, for example, blockchain. You know, if a bank starts, even if that bank is not offering anything about blockchain, they still release some content on blockchain because they understand people have to be forward looking.
Entire other area is work-life balance and things that improve quality of life of your audience. And typically it's not a pressing issue, but it's something, it obviously grows in with the whole HR
you cannot connect it to a kind of to an exact pain point, because on the level two, or a product, on the level two, it's a product, it's a client, it's a segment, it's a system, here you understand that, okay, we have very high stress level in the organization, it's an issue for everyone and everywhere, so we are addressing those higher level problems.
Also, one thing that you start letting go at this level is 100% uptake, because before that, that 100% of the audience of your of this specific course needs to take this course. At this level, you actually can create a course that some people might take and some people might not take, and you're all right with that, because some people might need it, some people might not, and the offering becomes personalized, so that, again, with the help of technology, very often it becomes tailored to specific people where, I'm this age, I've been with the company for so long, I worked in this department, I have these competencies, this is where I'm heading, because at this point the LMS joins with the talent management, kind of the integrated the integrated tech in this matrix talks about actually integrating talent management, HR, and learning into a single system where I know that this is the career path that I'm heading to, and these are the competencies I have to build using the learning in the company to actually get to that level. Not like, you've been promoted, now you have to learn this. So the whole thing becomes more forward-looking on one hand, and more bottom-up driven by people who say that, I want to learn about this and I need to learn about this, rather than you telling them what they need to know. So I would say that this is the excellent sweet spot where a lot of our clients actually reside. I would say that they might lag behind on certain levels, like maybe tech is not there yet, or they might be ahead of the curve on other things, and already in the mature stage where you'll find the maturity is probably those Fortune 500 huge companies that
and again
can actually invest a lot of effort into many things.
And again, when we talk about maturity, which is kind of this next level, which I would see as kind of in its 100% form, I haven't seen that. Right. I have seen that in certain parts of the organization, right? Some big companies can get that maturity for the back office or the management level, right? But to cover the whole organization becomes very, very complex, because what we can see here, it's driven by collaboration. So it's a lot of interconnection between learning and the business and building things together, and that becomes, for many, it becomes a challenge. It just becomes a challenge to grow.
We actually had the problem that you cannot have class learn, where it participates in peer-to-peer learning and so on, in a company where there is a lot of people who are
blue collar
essentially, right? So if you take Amazon, you have, like, most of the company actually works in a warehouse for minimum wage. If you take a huge company like McDonald's, right, most people do Mac jobs there. It's called a Mac job for a reason, and you can't expect them to do that. That was Rice's opinion, and I thought, like, no, that's actually not true. And if you look at a supermarket store, and you see this young person with maybe face tattoos and no education, and doing their job for not a very great wage by any standards in any country and so on, you might find, actually, if you talk to them, that somewhere else they have like an amazing hobby or great Instagram, or they make music, or they help kids in Africa or anything else. People are way more than their jobs now. This is the 21st century, not the 20th century, where the whole idea of blue versus white collars actually originated from. And it's different now. You can actually expect those people to contribute to learning, and you can actually expect them, and you have to foster this culture of these people contributing to your company being a learning organization, because a lot of know-how actually resides with those people. Who else knows how to organize a warehouse better than the person who actually works there 12 hours a day through those terrible shifts in those very noisy warehouses, and so on and so on. And you can either treat them as people who will not bring anything useful to the table, and as a result they won't, or you can treat them as people who can actually do that, and some of them will. Most of them probably won't, but some of them will. And that's a little bit of a culture and HR question. I think the maturity comes when you actually start realizing that, because otherwise you can be on all those kind of shelves and still kind of have this training mentality from level one for the better half of your organization.
Yeah, for that, I agree with you with a caveat.
Not like yesterday.
Not like yesterday, but yeah, after we had a row, then I started thinking, so what we were talking about, right? Because my idea was that basically some parts of organization don't have it and maybe don't need it, right? And then I realized that actually, if the company becomes mature, if the culture changes, and most importantly, if learning people get a seat at the table,
right?
And what maturity means in this 21st century is that, of course, you become more digital. Then basically, I would expect that in a very future that essentially everybody you had, there will be maybe 50, right? And there you need those collaborators.
Right.
There you need those guys. And those guys, what's interesting, and this is of course defined by many factors, the social, demographic, genetic, whatever, you will be able to select those that will stay with you and who will be a bit more they will work with technology. They will not be carrying the bags or the boxes. Yeah. They will be operating the machines, right? And what is important is that you create that culture where you can nurture them and where you don't lose them. Because if you have that training mentality, you will force those people out of your company.
Right.
And we see research showing that basically why people leave. They leave due to reasons that they don't like their management, for example, right? They always leave the manager, not the company.
Yeah.
Right. But on a more but researchers that started to measure things that actually found out that it's the development opportunities. So basically, if you want your company to go digital, it actually starts from the culture. Because if you treat people, like a 19th century, then you will not have those people able to digitalize your company.
At this point, this might sound like something far-fetched or very futuristic, but in fact, that's not just not far. It's actually, it has happened in many companies. Take again any supermarket. You have 10 cashiers, who were scanning stuff. And if they had to solve a problem, there was this, chief cashier who would be able to solve the problem, and all they needed to do that. Now we buyers are actually doing that ourselves with the machines, and now instead of 10 people, you have one, but that one person's
overseas.
One person's job is actually to solve problems and actually provide customer care, and they actually have to be problem solvers. They have to be customer oriented. They have to be kind of different and collaborative as well. So that's it's already happened in many industries. If you take airlines, the amount of people that are replaced by machines in every job is huge now, and those people are now again mostly solving problems. We had a whole breakfast, I think, about that, where we were explaining that as we get more digitized, we need a different kind of people, and we need to train up for those functions, of actually, again, problem solving, taking care of people, and being collaborative rather than and creative in a way as well. So yeah, let's touch upon other shelves in here, right? So we talked about collaborative learners, right, who actually want to contribute to learning, but also it's about collaboration on the management level, where I think it's this point where this learning specialist gets a seat at the table with other functions, so that when a new product is getting created, like let's say our bank has created this new card, right, or our airline has created this new product, which is a shop where you can spend points and so on, then typically at that table there's the product people and sales people who have the reasoning for making that. There's sometimes the production people who actually make the product, could be the AT people, could be actual manufacturing people, and so on. Marketing is typically also there because they will be there kind of to understand the product and understand how we sell that and come up with ideas. Something like, hey, we have this offering for young mothers, for example, right? So let's actually add it to the packages that are given out in all hospitals to the young mothers, and something like they will be there throwing in ideas, working on the same table, creating this new product. But learning people get the task of actually, okay, now this is the product, now we have to create training for that. And this is where you start facing problems where you're like, hey, actually, why do we even need to train for this software where we could have built in the training into that software at that point if you asked us, right? Or one of my favorite examples is where you imagine the packaging of a product. I think this comes from Ryder's. So he bought some very or was it
it's a kohavan. It's a thing that you stick into the bottle of wine, press the button, the wine pours, you take it out, and the wine doesn't lose its flavor for a month. Yeah, right. So it's not a very easy thing when you first time get it.
Yeah. So and there are three ways to package this thing. One is from the manufacturing point of view, from the logistics, right? So if you ask people who will be shipping this, they will say, okay, we can package it this way so that it takes very little space. It's easier to ship, it's easier to package, and the machine can do that very cheap. So that's one way. Another way is by marketing, so that when you open the box, it's all laid out, it's very nice and beautiful, and it makes for a great Instagram picture, and people will be taking pictures, posting them online, and therefore sharing our brand and whatnot, right? And of course we'll have the brand right there in the middle, add the card with some promo for the next product. Let's talk about that. But if you had learning people in there, they would say, okay, well, we actually want people to learn to actually use that, and it's a complex, not break it, not spoil their wine, not get the wine on their shirt. So it's a complex thing. So let's package it in such a way so that every part that they take out combines with the next part that they see, and there's a little text that you put it together. Imagine this for any product in your organization, right? Imagine that any new system where you register a client actually is built as a wizard, which helps you self-learn doing that, or maybe even has a mode where you can actually get trained without breaking the system, right? With fake clients or maybe fake accounts and so on, but it's actual system. In a demo mode or something like that. Or imagine that now everyone has to use this new gadget in their work, a new scanner for something, and instead of just getting a scanner and then having a course somewhere else, that course is somehow integrated into that scanner or built around that scanner, right? Or there is a booklet with that scanner that helps you, or something else. It all happens only when learning function collaborates with other functions and is not this foster child who's handed the task of actually training people to do something after the fact. This is the mature organization. Learning people have the seat at the table, as high up as possible. This is where the CLO function comes in, and C means that CLO, CFO, CEO, COO, COO, all the C guys and girls are at the same table, and the learning is one of them. Aligned processes, it's self-explanatory. Actually, I think originally it was congruent processes, and I thought, like, what's congruent? I have to Google that. So it's aligned processes where, like I said, the training is aligned with let's say delivery, or with sales process, or with anything else. And technology, again, it elevates to the level where you can bring in, for example, sales data from your Salesforce system into training, and you can, or rather, bring in training into Salesforce to compare. What are you trying to do?
1 sec.
Okay. Let me just try and switch to a different network real quick. Okay, we'll try with this network. Is this better? Yeah, much better. Excellent. So, and we'll cut it out so that no one knows on the YouTube channel. So yeah, so I was talking about aligned processes and an enterprise technology where, for example, data from sales system goes into a learning system, so that you can actually see whether learning impacts sales or vice versa. And not just sales, pretty much any other system that matters for you. Let's say if you're an airline, the amount of complaints or lost luggage, right? Or the occupancy of your hotels, or pretty much anything, accidents, accident tracking system is aligned with learning system, and so on. So this is where it happens. And the content also, this is my favorite part, the holistic content is what we're trying to do now as a company with most of our clients. We're actually trying to take the content outside of the learning management system. So it's not like, here's the portal, it's super expensive, very, very nicely designed. We've paid a lot of money for that, tons of content, lots of systems which personalize content for you. But you have to go there to get trained, as opposed to training coming to you in ways that sometimes is even hard to imagine. Imagine you're on Teams and you're chatting with your colleagues about something, and you can't find a word, and you click on that, and there's a bot on Teams which jumps up and says, well, here's the definition of that term, and here's where you can find actual legal information about that thing on our legal system, and here's a link to the course where you can click and train you a specific part of that, or here's a video explainer about that, or something like that. Or again, where learning happens inside the system that you're working on, right? You have a client service system where you have to punch in clients' details, and if you see that the client, for example, doesn't have a country personal code, like country ID, it's a foreigner, then there's a little pop-up explaining you some things that you have to be aware when dealing with foreign customers and so on, right? It's where spell check becomes this our favorite Grammarly example, right? Where not just spell check joins your emailing, but it offers you correct wording, make sure that you're polite and clear enough. Yeah. And also, when Gmail checks that if you mention sending an attachment in an email, it actually understands that, and if you have not attached anything, it will tell you, hey, you mentioned an attachment, you have not attached anything. Are you sure you want to send this? So this is where learning becomes, job support, and where learning moves out of the learning management system into your actual workplace. So that's the mature organization. This is where we see Fortune 500 companies, the best of them, but no, some of them have terrible learning. Yeah, but and this is where you want to be right now. And I would say that if you kind of find yourself somewhere, level 3 with a little bit from 2, with a little bit of 4, you're in a very, very good place. We'll tell you what to do with that in a sec, but Now it's time to not be frustrated when you hear
Let's
about
dream.
level 5. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a pipe dream for most companies that I've worked with. Right, and yeah, this is an illustration that I came up with about holistic, right? So this is 1980s. Or maybe 1990s, where all of that stuff, you had to do that, like to play music, to program computers, to watch videos, to email people, to create videos, to listen to radios and whatnot. To, you know, there is a calculator, there is a book, there is a lot of other stuff. Now it's all inside your phone, right? So this is a huge power that you can actually harness. And you know, when we talk about holistic, learning, it's again where it's all connected into things that are right there at your fingertips, and you don't have to go to another room and tune something to do. Right. So yeah, the dreamy fifth level of that they call optimizing, but yeah, I would really say that it's mostly about innovation, actually.
I think innovating or innovation would be the better name.
Right. So let me just jump one slide ahead and remind you of the Gartner hype cycle. Right. We've talked about this in previous breakfasts, and essentially it explains you how any new technology enters the market and gets adopted. At this technology trigger point, then there's a peak of inflated expectations. Everyone's saying, virtual reality is the future. Everyone will be doing that. Or, mobile phones will replace or tablets. I think it was like tablets will replace notebooks. And 10 years later, we know that has not happened. And then everyone is like, yeah, tablets have no place in anywhere. They're useless gimmick, and everyone is disillusioned. And then at some point they find their way into a workplace or our lives, and there's a plateau of productivity when that technology is actually being used in a meaningful way. So I would say that this plateau of productivity is where you want to adopt most e-learning things, or rather learning things, in terms of technology or approaches or methods. However, if you're on level 5, you want to play a bit earlier with the inflated expectations phase, even with technology triggers. So at level 5, you are not just using everything that's available. You are actively creating things or trying out things that are available. Virtual reality training, right? Right now, I would be very skeptical about that if you ask me, hey, we want to build this new course in virtual reality. I would really ask you very hard questions, whether you really need that. We would go through and maybe we would determine that, yes, that's an excellent idea, or maybe not. But to arrive at the understanding of what works and what doesn't, someone had to try. And so someone had to fail. There are a ton of organizations who spent tons of money on failing at this new training technology, right? That same thing was true for video-based training 10 years ago, right? For training on Zoom, when Skype was in early stages. For pretty much any technology that we're using, e-learning as such failed many times years ago. But there were companies who were investing into this, where people were empowered to actually spend budgets on things that are not proven, and not just spend, but also measure, and sometimes try to invent them. One example is I was at a conference in Moscow with Sberbank. And Sberbank is not just the largest bank in Russia or in Europe, it's also the largest IT company in Russia, right? The amount of developers that they have in the bank is more than any other IT company in the country, including things like Yandex or anything else. So one thing they were talking about is that they have a system which scans managers' calendars for topics of their upcoming meetings and finds free slots and plugs in little snippets of learning before those meetings, which are topical, right? So it understands what the meeting is about, what kind of people will be there, what will be talked about, and also looks at what your competencies are and where you lack them maybe, and tries to plug in those little reminder trainings about whatever, negotiating maybe, or speaking skills, or formulating ideas, or conducting, or anything. So And they had to actually build this from scratch, right? And maybe this will be a normal part of every enterprise learning system, in a few years. But right now they have that thing, and they have failed a number of times, and probably it still is not excellent, and does not work like a charm every time. But they're working on that. They're spending money and resources on that. They're innovating, right? And this is also an example of responsive technology, right? The technology that actually proactively looks into your work life and tries to plug in learning in your fixed problems before they happen, so that you don't even notice them. And of course, it's an agile process, right? Because you're given budgets and resources in terms of people that you can spend it with, and you can actually decide what you do with this. And if you fail, you do something else, or actually you do that same thing again, but with more knowledge about that. And you can actually do that. So most corporations that we see are not there yet. You expect this typically from IT companies, like Tesla could be doing something like that, maybe, or Amazon could be doing something like that, maybe. But also, increasingly banks or manufacturing companies like car makers are doing that, energy companies are doing that, because they have the money actually and the resources to do that, but they also have probably matured enough into being the innovators and spearheading the whole industry, right?
And I think this is where we can also see why certain things fail when a company on the level 2, right, firmly on the level 2,
right,
with the learning culture, with this managerial approach, finds on the market this new technology, would it be an artificial intelligence driven learning or virtual reality or augmented reality, and kind of tries to adopt it.
right.
And this is when those biggest fails happen, because to be so innovative, it's not only about just buying it from the shelf, right? And this is when we become very, or at least me personally, I become very skeptical that you should not you are not able to kind of jump a couple of levels, right? I think you can conquer some of the territory in the nearby level, right? You can start going from mature organization to, let's go with optimizing, like it's on the slide, and you already start synthesizing, learning, or you become more agile. You kind of go there, right? But you cannot do those jumps.
No, you can't. It requires a certain level of organizational readiness, I would say, and buy-in from the management, from the very top, the whole organizational culture and so on to be there. Those things don't happen by themselves. And I would say that the further to the right you are, the up those levels you are, the more integration there is, and the more of degree of success of this is dependent on the overall company culture. I'm not a huge fan of this. Well, the organizational structure of the company, the way it operates, as opposed to the early things where, at the first level, those enthusiasts, they are not plugged into company at all. The company doesn't even know that the training is happening. It just knows that, people are working, if they need to fix something with training, they fix it with training. If they fix it some other way, they do it. No one cares at the management level about that. So yeah, there is you can't pull it off by yourself. This is why, at maturity you actually get the seat at the table and so on, and it all works backwards from there. So one thing I wanted to, if we have time, we have a few minutes. So just go ahead before.
No, just I totally agree with you, and I just wanted to mention that once again, as we started in the beginning, this is not a contest of levels, like I'm level 4, I'm level 3. No, it's a process, right? It's not a measurement of how good you are, it's a measurement of where you are. And I think it's important to realize that, specifically because you cannot jump into the next level, to look at where you are and understand internally, as we were talking yesterday, that what do you think about your organization? What does management think about it? What do people think? Because if you think we are a bunch of enthusiasts,
I have a slide about that.
Yeah, let's move to that slide.
So one thing is, again, this is not a competition. Being at level 4 is not necessarily better than being level 2, because, for example, when you start defining processes and building content proactively, that content typically becomes terrible, right? As opposed to very down to earth, very actionable, very useful content built by enthusiasts. When the content is getting built, in huge amounts across all job roles and competencies, or bought from external libraries, that content becomes terrible. So it's not, it's a progression, but not necessarily towards the good things, and you have to keep that in mind. It's like, building up strength, right? You give up on something else, and
flexibility,
flexibility, for example, right? Or on speed, or something like that. Right. So I wanted to actually, before I jump to the conclusion, I wanted to, well, first of all, thank you for commenting, but Carolina says that I like your suggestion how to minimize the information overload by building systems with self-explanatory usage. Right. So building learning into actual systems is an excellent way. And that overload is one of the forces that drives you up there, I think, right? Because if you just sit at level 2 where you just build content, response, and so on, you will find yourself building so much content that it can't be consumed by learners. It can't be realistically built in time to actually be useful, and it won't do anything for you. You'll be just churning it out, spending money on that, not achieving anything. So that's one of the huge driving forces behind that, I think. Now, quick comment, 2 useful things that I want to leave you with, or 3. The first one was that, it's not a competition. 2 is that to jump from level to level, there are certain things that you kind of have to focus on, right? So if you think that you're mostly in an emerging stage, which is great, look for great practices that you can actually make repeatable, right? That you can actually make systematic, and how you can make this a manageable process. Then if you find yourself like managing this top-down approach, creating learning and so on, think what you can do to actually empower people to ask for more, get know-how from people, to start working with management and so on, and also measure what you're actually doing, right? Not that just in terms of the uptake, but also in actual business impact and so on. If you find yourself at the excellent, amazing, by today's standards level, where level 3, think about where you can integrate, how you get the seat at the table with all the C functions, how you can integrate learning into actual work rather than have it sit in the learning management system. Think about integration. And then with innovation, take it with a grain of salt. Here's a grain of salt for you, magnified. So take it with a grain of salt, and understand that you have to be ready for that. And it's a big mission, and not necessarily sitting at a certain level requires you to go to the next level automatically. You just have to think about it. And the final useful thing, actionable thing that I want you to do actually is to take a colleague. It's better done in pairs or in threes or as a group. Take a colleague and talk about your organization. Well, first of all, introduce them to the concept. Ask us for the slide if you need that, and talk to them about where you are across every dimension, right? And focus on the things where you have difference of opinions, because those things where someone says, hey, we have the ad hoc process, and someone else says, no, we have the aligned process, right? Or where someone says, hey, we have this collaborative learning culture, and someone says, no, we are absolutely not there, and so on. So at those things where you will find the low-hanging fruits, the room for improvement that's easier to fill and improve, and not on just agreeable things like, we have a consistent process. Yeah, we have a consistent process. Let's try to align that. Yeah, let's do that. Very useful. But first of all, start with those discrepancies of opinions. And for that, you have to actually bring other people to the table. So introduce them to this concept, and hopefully they'll help you improve your learning and make you a nicer, happier, better performing organization.
Yeah, and kind of a final thought from my side, which actually just came to my mind right now, that this using such frameworks is also a very good idea if you want to get the seat at the table. Because this is when a CEO will understand learning is not just, they're talking about something there. It's all
training and courses,
quizzes. Yeah, well, that's all kindergarten. Because when you come and you show that to be a really cool organization, a competitive organization, certain things have to happen. Therefore, I have to be at the table. Therefore, we have to have budget and the vision and the political will to do that. They will start treating you in a completely different way.
Right. So follow us on your favorite social network, mark your calendars for the 12th, actually a week from now, there will be another breakfast because the 19th isn't working for us in Latvia. It's a holiday. So
next week.
Same time, same place, same great content. Well, the content actually will be different. We'll be talking about meaningful interactions. It will be the thing that I actually spoke about. DevLearn, I hope you'll find that useful, and it's very well rehearsed, unlike some of our breakfast. So thanks for joining. We hope that was useful. Wave your hands if you think that was useful, and type plus in chat if you think that that is good content. Any ideas, any comments, anything you want to share? We're always open. This will be on YouTube in a day or two. Thanks for joining.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.